800 kilometers northeast of Buenos Aires, in the dry sierras of the Córdoba province, where cows, sheep, and llamas peacefully graze, an endangered species which usually lives in the jungle has found a place to be protected and cared for. This last chance refuge, created 20 years ago, is the first and only center of its kind in Argentina. Every morning, the howler monkeys wake up the entire center to the sound of their screeching concert. Monkeys are the first victims of illegal fauna trade in Argentina. Those that arrive here learn to live in freedom and become monkeys once again. The majority have never lived with their peers and have never climbed a tree. Alejandra Juarez, the instigator of this rehabilitation project, is devoting her life to safeguarding the species.
In this center, the system we use revolves around freedom, which is unusual for a rehabilitation center. The fact that they live their lives here in the most natural environment possible has enabled them to reproduce. We're up to our third generation of offspring.
This represents a rousing success. One female has even given birth to 2 youngsters, bearing witness to the excellent living conditions. This exemplary work was hailed by the renowned primatologist Jane Goodall during her visit here in 2009.
This Center for Protection, Rehabilitation, and Conservation of Argentine Primates has been in operation for 20 years. It tries to provide a solution to a serious problem for howler monkeys that have become mascots or pets. It was and still is illegal, but the traffic existed and still exists today. These monkeys, which people buy, were captured after their mother's death. And when they become large adults, people don't want them anymore. Most of the time they're given to zoos where they become depressed and often die. Their natural defenses are diminished and they acquire different diseases. But it's above all their psychological needs that cause their death.
The Caraya Refuge for the howler monkey in Guarani stretches over 360 hectares. The owner has turned it over to the association. It's one of the rare outside financing it receives. Most of its revenue comes from donations and visitors' admission fees. Rehabilitation begins in this space, frequented by llamas donated by a breeder who gave up his trade. The monkeys learn to behave as if they were in the wild. Even in captivity, they have the same howl as their wild counterparts.
The Caraya monkey is the largest in South America and in the Southern Hemisphere. Because of one of their unique characteristics, they're also called the most diplomatic monkeys in the world. Thanks to their anatomical structure, which is something like a pocket, their howling resounds and prevents all confrontation. In the morning, they howl to indicate to other groups that they are present. I'd like to add that because of the volume of sound they emit, Caraya monkeys are also considered to be the noisiest animals in the world, which is why they appear in the Guinness Book of World Records.
If there is any combat, they fight with their powerful screams. Alejandra's team includes 2 salaried workers and volunteers from national and international organizations like Projects Abroad, all of whom are responsible for the 60 borders and the upkeep of the reserve.
The monkeys that arrive here are generally very humanized, with very human traits. The newcomer begins with an adaptation stage, during which we remain in close contact with it until we find another Caraya monkey similar in character so that they can become friends. The nnewcomer has to have an example to which it can refer and emulate. From that point on, there is a stage of socializing and recognition of its own species. This takes some time, and if all goes well, this socializing will end with the training of a group that can be released at a later date. As far as babies that come here, mainly orphans whose mothers have been killed, we have a nursery where we keep the youngsters with one person in charge of them.
The baby howlers are housed in small outbuildings, sheltered from the wind and the cold. Once spring arrives, they can sunbathe in the arms of their nanny, Pia, a young biology student who comes here during her school vacations and provides the tender, loving care of a surrogate mother.
None of the babies here can be with their mothers, either because they were hunted when they were infants or because they were born on the reserve. Whatever the reason, their mothers cannot care for them. In the artificial breeding zone, our work consists of raising them to become independent and to enter into relationships with larger and more powerful monkeys and to eventually be released.
Something seems to intrigue this monkey. There's some agitation in the rehabilitation area.
Vamos, vamos, vamos. Vamos.
You got him?
Vamos, chica. ¿Ya está?
Cuidado, pero la puerta.
Sí, sí. Vale, síganos. Ustedes sigan, yo sigo la puerta. Lo que estamos haciendo en este momento es
We're taking them out of the socializing zone and transferring them to the pre-release zone. It'll take a little time, usually 1 or 2 weeks for them to get used to this area. Then we'll begin the work of freeing them.
todo el trabajo de liberación.
The dry landscape has some small forest areas scattered around. These jewels of greenery provide shelter for different kinds of monkey families living in freedom.
There are 4 here, 2 males, 1 adult and 1 youngster, and 2 females, mother and daughter. Together they form a family.
Hola, amor.
Now that the acclimatization cage has been installed in the new space, we're going to release them from the inside. They'll stay there for 1, 2, or 3 days because it's become a fairly solid group. Afterwards, they'll be freed and let loose in their sector.
Caraya monkeys play an important part in the environment. Biologists refer to them as guardian monkeys or health guardians, since they're the first animals to be affected by viruses and parasitic diseases. They are therefore key indicators of the state of an ecosystem.
One characteristic of the Caraya monkey helps us to set up this type of rehabilitation. They actually occupy a very small territory, and more importantly, they only travel a few meters a day. So this helps us in the sense that we can release them and form groups within this sector, or even release them in an area which is not their place of origin. We do this to determine the best type of management and maintenance.
The vegetation in the Córdoba province doesn't correspond to the howler monkey's natural habitat. These primates live in tropical forests, where their diet consists primarily of leaves and fruit. Since these leaves are available everywhere, contrary to the fruit, they have less reason to move around.
A comer, camisón, vamos. Gustavo, Gala, Dala, vamos chicos. A comer, camisón, vamos.
This is a group that lives in a pine forest where there isn't enough of a variety of leaves for the animals to feed on. We therefore bring the leaves they need to complete their diets. Camisón is the dominant male. He captures and steals females from different groups to form his own group. It makes you feel good to see them like this because when they arrive, they've been mistreated and they're undernourished. I've followed them since they first came here. I've seen monkeys who came here and are afraid of the other monkeys because they've never seen one before. But little by little, they mingle with the others and form their own groups. Then they're released to create a family and have babies. So it's gratifying to know that they return to the nature from which they never should have left. People should not snatch them away when they're young or do them any harm.
It's so satisfying to see them develop and to climb, since very often they arrive without knowing how to climb up a tree. They don't know how, and they're not physically prepared, nor are their muscles sufficiently developed for it. And after a while, when you see them climbing trees and developing a sort of dynamism, it's enormously gratifying.
Juan Pablo heads for the most remote part of the reserve, an oasis with old indigenous elms and acacias, contrary to the pine trees planted for commercial reasons that one finds throughout the region.
This is Group 4, a group that lives in an almost totally wild state. We give them a supplement of food because it's a good opportunity to check on them and make sure that everything's okay and whether the group is still complete. However, they don't need the food supplement we give them. The leaves, buds, and fruit in this zone are enough for them to subsist without human intervention. They could easily return to their natural habitat.
I can say today that many of the groups are ready to return to nature. From a psychological, physical, and emotional point of view, they're totally rehabilitated.
The monkeys cannot be released into their natural environment because they're still the object of illegal traffic. There are nevertheless some interesting possibilities.
There are lots of private reserves, protected sites that don't have any carayas. We're also considering releasing groups in Guarani Indian territory, which would probably be justifiable. The word Caraya in Guarani means chief of the forest.
Alejandra's work and her know-how are recognized by the most eminent primatologists. In 2011, her Cumbra refuge was rewarded by APE, an International Primatologist Association.